turning the channels on is a lot quicker and easier than putting together a true advertising strategy here. I think some property managers will end up pulling back from Airbnb. Putting together a very thoughtful, well-executed professional brand is super important.
How do you encourage guests to trust your website and book direct? What are the key marketing strategies that every short-term rental manager should be utilizing? And what role does brand identity play when you're growing a vacation rental business? Today's guest on the Host Planet podcast is Alex Husner, an experienced chief marketing officer and the co-host of the Alex and Annie Real Women of Vacation Rentals podcast. For marketing tips and direct booking strategies, this is an episode not to be missed. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the Host Planet podcast. Why do you think so many property management companies fail to prioritize marketing?
I think it comes down to when they were started. So if you're a company that's been around for a long time, got started back in the 80s, and there's quite a few of those that are over here in the States in these more, destination tourism type markets. They grew up with marketing. We didn't have OTAs back in the day, and marketing used to literally be putting ads in newspapers for your vacation rental company. So over the years, the companies that really had that mindset of understanding advertising and just driving demand, I think that, they've continued and they've built big book direct brands because they just had that longer play in mind. But for companies that started within the last, less than 7-8 years, it's a different ballgame because, you could just put listings up and let the channels drive all the tourists to you and the demand. And then, in exchange for that, you pay a commission on a booking. But, obviously things have started to shift and people are understanding that the value of having a direct booking is pretty inherent. But the problem is, the cost of that is not necessarily something that a lot of companies are willing to pay. And you don't feel like you're paying as much when it's a commission on a booking that you're already marking up versus when you're paying your credit card bill to Google at the end of the month. So I think it comes down to in this era, I feel like it's more of just companies when they got started, but then also the ones that are not marketing, getting them over that hump of like, do we really want to invest in this? Because it is an investment.
Has it kind of become too easy with the OTAs?
I think so. And I think the OTAs I think they listen to all of our podcasts. I really do. And I think that they are realizing we talk about, okay, you get the booking on the OTA and then it's your job to bring them back to a direct booking. Shame on you if you don't, if they book again on the OTA. The Airbnb is making it extremely sticky. With their new off-platform rules, and they do not want you to rebook that guest direct. That is not part of their playbook. So I think they've made it easy, but now they're making it very hard for anybody who wants to get into direct bookings if you hadn't already started that a long time ago.
Okay, real talk now for all you hosts out there. You know that moment when your guest messages you again with, hey, what's the Wi-Fi code? Or you're staring at 5 different calendars, wondering if you've accidentally double booked the cottage. Yes, we've all been there. That's why here at Host Planet, we recommend Hostfully. It's basically your rentals control center. It handles bookings across all the big platforms, syncs your calendars to ensure there are no double bookings, automates guest messages, and even creates these really slick digital guidebooks that stop all the repeat questions. Honestly, it just makes your life easier and keeps your guests happier, helping you achieve those all-important 5-star reviews. And here is a little bonus. If you're a Host Planet listener, you can get $500 off onboarding for Hostfully's property management software and 30% off digital guidebooks for life. Just hit the link in the show notes and use the codes PLANET500 for the PMS and HostPlanetGB for the guidebooks. And if you'd like a proper walkthrough, there's also a link to book a demo with Frank Bosey from Hostfully. He will show you how it all works. Less stress, more bookings, sorted with Hostfully. What do you make of those Airbnb policy changes?
Oh man, I would love to talk to somebody that really is on the inside of it and just know, okay, how are they going to enforce all this stuff? I guess that's one question I have. But I'm sure they've got ways. I think it makes complete sense for Airbnb, right? Like, I mean, if you look at it, I try and look at everything as without or just like from that perspective. I mean, for them, it makes complete sense. They've invested a ton in their brand, and they want people to always have that experience. And they know if they can control it, it's going to be a better experience for their company. Same as how we feel about it, right? We feel if we could control the communication, it's a better experience for our company and for the guests. But I think it's just going to make things very complicated for companies that if they're using third-party tools, even through their own software, having to have different SOPs for Airbnb guests versus direct guests or Verbo guests. It makes it really complicated to do business. I think some property managers will end up pulling back from Airbnb if they already are doing well on other channels. And in some markets, I mean, Airbnb is not the leading OTA. So I think those markets, if they really have to have that business, they'll stick with it. But if they could allocate it somewhere else, they're going to do it.
It's something that I think illustrates the power of Airbnb. I was speaking to a friend of mine who's not involved in STR at all, but he's a software engineer, and he was looking at their model and looking at the integrations and the APIs and all that kind of thing. And he said, well, if Airbnb just stopped integrating with companies, it would ruin a lot of them overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's very clear Airbnb caters to the individual hosts. But when you look at the percentages, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but the wide majority of inventory is from professional managers that are on Airbnb. So they don't seem to want to work with us quite as much, as it would make sense to. But we'll see. It's going to be another interesting saga, I feel like, in the Airbnb chronicles.
Another saga indeed. Back to kind of marketing then and direct bookings. What are some common mistakes that you think property managers are making when they're trying to build a direct booking channel?
I think you kind of have to take a step back. And the main thing is, it's like, I get people come to me all the time that they say, we want to increase direct bookings, or if they don't really have any at all, they want to focus on it. They want to start it. And you really have to think about first, like, okay, what's the reason why we're doing this? What are we trying to accomplish? What is the strategy going to be? And, the tactics, whether you're using email marketing, PPC, SEO, social media, any of the places that you're trying to drive these direct bookings to or from, what's the strategy behind that? And I think most companies, the biggest mistake they make is they're not thinking about that higher level connected strategy at the beginning. I had a client of mine who came to me and she said exactly that. She wanted to get into, pushing direct bookings now. And we're looking at her website. And I said, I would be doing you a disservice if I tried to tell you why you need to be doing all these different tactics right now, because your website is not going to convert when somebody gets there. I mean, it's functionality wise had a lot of problems, but also there was no story. There was no differentiator between her company versus the company down the road in a very competitive market. So we took a step back and now rebuilding the website first, and then we'll start, adding the tactics in at that point. But it's a much bigger undertaking than a lot of companies think when they first start thinking, okay, we'll just turn this on, turn that on. It's not that easy. I mean, turning the channels on is a lot quicker and easier than putting together a true advertising strategy here.
I mean, yeah, the foundations need to be there with a website that people can trust. And direct bookings are not free, right? They take a lot of money and effort to get to that stage. Sure.
Yeah. And whether you have an internal team that's managing it or you use external teams or agencies, I mean, there's the people there's the cost of the services, and then there's the people that are managing it. So it definitely can be a costly thing.
What do you think are the most effective direct booking marketing tips if there are property managers out there and maybe they've been trying to get direct bookings but maybe not having much success? Where should they really focus?
I honestly, I would say to go back to the strategy. And I know that some people listening are probably going to say, well, how do I figure out what my strategy is? And I think you have to look at it from the perspective of, if you're trying to, especially if you're trying to get these guests off of the OTAs and to book with you direct, if you're getting them from there in the first place, you have to really look at the customer buying cycle, which this can be replicated in any industry. It's not just vacation rentals, but how they come to know about you, how do they move through the cycles of know, like, try, trust, buy, repeat, refer, right? That whole cycle. And when you look at it from that perspective and you make sure that you've got that direct booking flywheel, as we like to call it, that you've got those different touch points outlined of how you're going to move somebody through that process, that's when you really start to build some good volume from it, right? But it's not something that happens overnight. And I think people will jump in real quick and say, I'm going to focus on doing this one thing, but I'm not getting this other side of it that's going to make the one thing I started with more effective. So, I really think the repeat, the refer part is two of the main steps that people really don't get enough. I mean, they're not harnessing the reach that all of our guests have. I mean, how do you reach the friends and family of those guests? I mean, like, how do you reach people that they already know you and they already like you, they trusted you, they bought from you? How do you reach their people? And I mean, that's where the marketing magic can really happen when you crack that code.
And that can be fairly low hanging fruit in some cases if it's just a simple follow up message. If we move then pivot a little bit towards brand, you've helped companies scale to hundreds of properties. What role does brand identity play when you're growing a vacation rental business?
It's a huge role. I think it's massively important. And I see this a lot in many markets, that you've got companies that have different versions of the same name, right? So it's like seaside, sea stay, it's like there's a few different words around these beach markets, beach vacations, beach this, beach getaway, that I think, a brand is not just your name, but I think in one respect, the name that you choose is very important as a differentiator. But I think the brand is important because you're building. The complex part of this business is you're building your company and the brand to be perceived and accepted and loved by different stakeholders. So you've got your homeowners, you've got your guests, you've got your employees, and you've got ownership of the company, whatever that looks like. As far as what the general public is going to see out there, what the homeowners are going to see, why they're going to look at you and feel like you're the trusted source in that market, like you have to be out there with your brand. You have to be consistent. You have to be professional. It's about building trust. And same thing with the guests, that if somebody's going to find you on Airbnb and then they somehow find your property elsewhere and they go to your direct booking website and your site and the brand just look inconsistent and there's not those trust signals that make them feel comfortable with the booking, they're going to go back to Airbnb. So really putting together a very thoughtful, well executed professional brand is super important.
You've spoken there a few times about trust and, getting to the website, trusting that brand, to the point that you're willing to book with them. What are the most effective ways to gain people's trust when they land on your website?
I think this sounds pretty simple, but it's true. The website needs to work well. Like, it needs to be easy. It needs to be very clear path of when you come on, what you're supposed to do, how you get people through the process. That's one very often overlooked thing, even though it's simple. Another thing is, I mean, how you're explaining your differentiation. I mean, what's different about you versus the other companies? Showing pictures of your staff. I mean, like, what's the history? What's your about us? What's your origin story? I think that's super important for guests to see on the site. Reviews, obviously, super important. User generated content reviews, even better. I mean, if people can see people that look like them, that they were having a good time in a property, that's very compelling. Jen, just making sure those touch points are all in the right places as somebody's going through that booking process. So we know people when they land on the property page and then when they're on the checkout page, that's typically when the most questions are coming up. So are you outlining a lot of those questions that your reservation team or that your guest services team are fielding? Or are you just not putting that information there and the guest is having to constantly reach out and now you're having to respond to all these inquiries? I think there's so much that can be learned just from looking at what people are asking you and just kind of backwards engineering. How do we get that information in front of them ahead of time or when they're in that process so that it's a no-brainer? They're not sitting there wondering and then maybe calling, maybe not calling, maybe emailing, maybe not emailing, and potentially leaving the site. Because it's probably 1% of traffic for a vacation rental or any kind of travel tourism type website converts to a booking. So pretty high likelihood that the guest is not going to book. What can you do in that journey to make sure they have all the information and they feel comfortable, that the site looks consistent, that the booking engine doesn't look totally different from the rest of the website that they just went through in that journey. I mean, that's a huge thing that drives me absolutely nuts when I'm buying anything online. But yeah, just you have to look at it from the guest perspective. Like, go through your own website, and that's one thing that people don't do enough. I was on a panel in Orlando last year, and I was moderating it. I asked the people on the panel, I said, how often do you test your website? Do you do a test booking? And all three of them, none of them had ever done that on their own website. And I said, okay, well, that's your homework. You probably should go back and do it, because I bet you're going to find something that you didn't realize was happening there. But just have to look at it from the guest perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Like we've spoken a few times on this podcast about staying at your own rental to fully understand the guest experience. It's a similar thing with your website. And you mentioned there, putting photographs of yourself, the hosts on there. And I saw somebody in a Facebook group who said he put a photo of him and his wife on their direct booking website, but also on their OTA photos. And he said that it had helped him to get more bookings. So showing that human face can be really effective. What advice would you give to the smaller operators out there who want to look bigger and a bit more credible?
That's a good question. Sometimes I don't think that you have to look big. And that's probably been the biggest change in the industry, as far as my experience over the last 10 plus years, is that was a thing. I mean, I've been in the Myrtle Beach market here for 16 years in the vacation rental industry. And the company that I worked for, Condo World, for 13 of those years, when I started, they had about 250 properties. And when I left, we were a little bit over 500, but booked reservations for another 5,000 throughout the Myrtle Beach region. And we looked huge and we were big. But I remember when we had 500 properties thinking, we're really not that big. There's companies out there that have like 1,000 or 2,000. Like, we're really not that big. We were big. And I think now, looking at things, of a lot of homeowners and a lot of guests, they don't necessarily want that. I mean, I think at one point that, and not to say that it's just categorically bad to be a large company, it's not, but a lot of people want a smaller company. That's why things have just changed in our industry. I feel like that they want to feel like they're renting from one person that they know. So I don't know that you have to come across that you're big if you're small and you want to be like that. I think you have to come across as very professional, and you've got the whole business in order, and you really understand the steps of the guest as they are pre-booking, before the stay, after the stay, while they're there. I mean, that you really are anticipating the needs of these guests at the right times. And it makes you look professional, and that should lead to you being able to grow. But you don't have to say you're the biggest these days, I feel like.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Offering that boutique level of service and style is often what people want. So yeah, really, really good point. To 2025 then, we've mentioned Airbnb a little bit. What do you see as the biggest trends in the STR space this year?
Well, I mean, I think everybody is very much focused on inventory growth this year. And that's, I work mostly with larger operators, but inventory growth, I think everything that has gone on many years leading up to this, but with Vacasa, it has a lot of people just kind of sitting, waiting, thinking, okay, this is our opportunity to jump in and potentially pick up a lot of properties if we're aggressive with our marketing, and how do we figure out how to do that. So I think that's something that is definitely top of mind, just inventory growth, really focusing on that side of the marketing, and understanding that it has to be a separate budget than your guest marketing, because it's a different function of the company. The return can be huge, but I mean, you're spending more to get less, versus you can figure out your conversion rate and your return on ad spend pretty easily on Google or some of the other tactics that you're using to drive direct bookings. But with homeowner marketing, it is much more of a long game, that you're making this investment, but to spend X amount of money to know that the average homeowner is going to stay on your program for, I think it's like 7 to 8 years or something like that. I mean, the lifetime value of that customer it could be massive. So but having that right mentality of, we know this is the long game, right? So I think a lot of people are focused on inventory growth this year. Beyond that, I think a lot of companies are trying to diversify. I mean, they're worried about what's going on with Airbnb. I think people want more channels and more options. The hard part is a lot of the more niche channels, they just don't produce the volume. So I think there's an opportunity for channels to kind of up the game, because there's a lot of companies that are willing to say, I'll take my eggs out of the Airbnb basket and I'm going to try some other options here. But on the other side, Mr. OTA, you have to be sending me bookings. We've seen Marriott Homes and Villas. They've really come on strong. I think in the last year or so, it took them a while to build up to that point, but it's it's not easy for these OTAs to also compete. I mean, they're competing directly with Airbnb too, so that's not easy. But I think the OTAs that are more community and network focused, like Marriott, because of their rewards program, there's a lot of merit to that. So it'd be nice to see some more OTAs that come into the game, kind of with their own audience that we know we're going to get some volume from.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What this industry can learn from the hotels and kind of mesh the two together a little bit. What are the key lessons from your CMO career that vacation rental managers should really be taking to heart?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I think you should be building your brand every day. I think that's a very important thing for companies to be mindful of. I think that at the end of the day, you can have the best marketing in the world, but if your operations are not well run and it's not going to work, right? I mean, like you also can't have great operations but no marketing. So they really have to go hand in hand. And if you're going to build a business that it's more than just managing one or two properties, that you want this to be something that, is legacy making for you and the people that are part of it, you really have to map out the entire business and your success plan. So I think that's an important part. I think one thing that I've loved about the experiences that I've had in this industry is that, I mean, technically marketing is the field that I'm in, but I am working with companies on so many different parts that it's the entire business strategy. It's the growth strategy. It's the brand strategy, and getting to see a lot there, understanding, the decisions that you make on tech are hugely important. And that right there can ruin your marketing and your operations if you don't choose wisely. So I think, from a CMO perspective, it's more than just marketing. It's really understanding the business and making sure that all the parts are running on the right cylinders, because it's vital to marketing success that the company is also doing the right things in each of the different verticals. And it's not easy. I mean, running these businesses is definitely not. This is not a just get rich quick kind of thing like we always talk about. It's not an easy business.
Definitely not. Don't necessarily listen to the guys on Instagram and TikTok, because it is not get rich quick.
No, not so passive.
So your career then, you've recently kind of launched your own consultancy after various CMO roles. So what inspired the move, and tell us about the clients that you're working with and the exciting projects that you're working on.
Yeah, again was with Condo World here in the Myrtle Beach market for 13 years, and just got to a point where I loved the business. I played such a important role in my life and my life in the business for those years, but kind of felt like I needed to try something new, and the opportunity came up for me to join Casago as their CMO, and really was more not marketing focused. It was more franchise development focused. And then it was going to, at some point, transition to more traditional CMO type role. But in that year of going out and meeting existing managers, and in Costco's the franchise model where we were out, when I came on, this was new, that they were trying to get companies that were existing property management businesses to convert to become a Costco franchise to run under their umbrella and benefit from the economies of scale. And I was tasked basically with the entire East Coast and got to travel all over the place, actually, and travel a lot to the West Coast as well, but got to meet managers, big and small, and all different stages of their journey and just seeing the struggles that they were having and the successes too. But it was really eye-opening to me because I, again, had been here in this market for so long and really just knew the companies here and the company that I worked for. But to see that perspective across the country and just realize there's a huge need for better marketing within the industry. I knew that for sure. A lot of the things that we did at Condo World, I assumed everybody did. And I found out that was not true. I mean, we were doing things in a very, very different way and with a very different strategy than most traditional companies were. And so just kind of understanding how can I dispel the information that I've learned in those years to, strategies that are going to help managers depending on what size they are and where they are in their journey, and decided, okay, this is the time. I've got the connections, I've got the knowledge, I've got the experience. I really should just do this on my own. And so I decided to start my own business last year as a fractional CMO. In some cases, it's me. It's just me that I come on and I'm leading their team internally or their vendors. In some cases, I'm bringing my team or I help them bring vendors to the table that are going to get the work done. So every situation I work with is a little bit different, but I also work with technology providers in the space too. I'm a fractional CMO for BOOM, the world's first AI property management system, which has been a really great journey there too. So it's been a really fun year. I've got companies all up and down the East Coast that I work with, and it's just been really fulfilling to get to work with really great people and just help them grow.
Fantastic. And you've got your Alex and Annie sign there just behind you on the wall. Got to ask you about the podcast, of course, because you're one of the top hospitality shows in the States. Very inspiring for our little podcast. So just tell us what inspired you to start it and what have been your favorite takeaways from your hosting journey?
Yeah, so it was during COVID that Annie Holcomb and I, we had been friends, and she was at I think Booking Pal at the time, and we used Booking Pal at Condo World. That's how we met. She was my account manager, I believe, and we hit it off. And during COVID, we decided to start going on Clubhouse, and she was really great at those, and she invited me to come on to a couple of them. And if anybody, it's so funny that was like a thing, and it was huge, and then it was just gone. Like, I don't know anybody that goes on Clubhouse anymore, but it was live in the moment. You couldn't go back and replay these discussions. And so we thought, gosh, I mean, there are people that would like to hear these conversations we've had. Like, maybe we do a podcast, and we like having these talks with these industry leaders. And so just kind of kicked the idea around, and more or less we're kind of casual about it. But then it started taking shape when we were talking to people, and when we came up with the name, which the name is just our names, Alex and Annie, and the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. It just, the brand started kind of formulating in front of us, and we thought, okay, this is kind of fun. Let's just give it a try. And we announced it at VRMA in San Antonio. This was the first conference, everybody back from COVID, and just the support we got from the industry was overwhelming, that everybody couldn't wait, wanted to hear the first episode, couldn't wait to listen. And so we put it out there, and it took off a lot faster than we thought it would. And it just opened up so many doors for us, personally, professionally. I think that's kind of the main thing. It's helped both of us grow in our already very experienced careers, but to a different level of just meeting people all over the world. I mean, yourself included. We've met so many. We just had you on our show recently. We've met so many people literally all over the world through doing this, and it's just been an incredible experience for both of us. But we are now almost 4 years in, which is crazy, and still going strong. And just, we love having people come on and tell their story about how they got started, what their struggles were, what, the successes they've had, and just really, we want people to be authentic on our show. We don't like people to come on and do sales pitches. We really want to know the story of what makes these people tick and how they got to where they are. And I think that's been what's just been a lot of fun for both of us.
Yeah, they really do. Podcasts open up a lot of doors and get you those conversations that would never really happen or might take years to happen. But with a podcast, they materialize. Okay, then, Alex, we've got a few questions to finish. We ask these to everybody who comes on our main Friday podcast. Your favorite brand in the STR industry and why?
I think there are so many amazing brands in our industry. And I think I'm partial to Condo World when I was there for sure. In those years that it was my favorite brand for sure. These days, it's hard to say. I've all the brands I work with are amazing. I think I'm going to go with Boom for today. I think what we're doing with the Boom brand is just been spectacular, and the level of intelligence behind the technology that they're building is next level. And what we're building of that brand, and we've got some big announcements. I'm not sure when this episode's going to air, but we're trying to take kind of the same mentality that I talked about earlier with big vacation rental companies, but in the technology space of bringing the owners and the people that have built this groundbreaking technology to the forefront to really share their stories and why they built it and how they built it. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see, because you don't get a lot of the tech companies in the space that are telling that story. I mean, it's the tech is the tech, but at the end of the day, people buy brands because of the people behind it. That's a big part of it. So we're telling a good story there. So that's my brand of the year for sure.
Great shout out for Boom. Looking forward to those new announcements. We'll have to get Shahar back on the podcast to tell us all about those. Next question then, an individual in the STR space you'd like to give a shout out to, and why?
I'm going to go with Simon Lehmann. Simon's been a good friend of Annie and I's for many years, and was somebody that before I knew him, I looked up to him because I saw him on stage and I would see him speak, and he was just so brilliant. And he always had his red shoes on. He's real smart with his own personal brand. I respected that. But he's always just been somebody that has been very kind to Annie and I, and we've had him on the show many times. We used to do Simon Says, that he was our first of the month episode pretty often, and he'd come on and talk about different things going on. And it's really fun to go back and listen to those episodes over the last couple of years and just see what he was predicting and the things that have been accurate, which I would say is probably 99% of them. But some of the things that have just kind of come out of left field. But hey, Simon.
Yes, Mr. Red Shoes himself. He's been on our podcast a couple of times and always fantastic value. Okay, then final question, Alex, your number one lesson learned from your time in the STR space.
This business is all about people, and it's all about relationships. And more than any other industry that I know, we are really a very connected group. And that's one thing that makes it really fulfilling, I think, is that we kind of are one big crazy discombobulated family across the world here. But it's the relationships that you build with people, and that's what makes the business. I mean, the people build the business, and that's where the heart of it is. And just really, leaning into those relationships and understanding that somebody you meet today, you could down the line end up being able to help them, or they could help you, and you never know. I mean, it's so interconnected that just understanding that you really need to nurture those relationships, because they're going to help you, and you're going to help other people, and it's going to make your journey in this crazy business a lot more fun and fulfilling.
I couldn't agree more. Alex, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining us on the Host Planet podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, James. Appreciate it.
Great to chat to Alex Husner there about Airbnb, marketing and direct booking. That's just about it for today's episode. If you're looking for more free education, head to hostplanet.club, the fastest growing multimedia platform in the short-term rentals industry. We're proud to help hosts and property managers supercharge their businesses by sharing a wealth of free content. Head online to sign up for our newsletter, download our suite of ebooks, and listen to our podcast series. Until next time, happy hosting.